People of Reddit, what is the most absurd rule your parents had growing up? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. No glassware, even though we had a bunch. My dad told me we'd drop it, it would break, we wouldn't clean it up, he'd cut his foot and die, and it would be our fault. As an adult, I came back and took all the glasses after I asked him if he was scared about cutting his foot still. Problem solved. My parents were two different flavors of crazy, so there's more. One of my chores was recycling. Once a week, I'd have to sit down with all the recycling bins and separate all the plastic from the cardboard and cut it all down so it would all fit equally. This took a few hours. One day, I watched the trash truck come by, pick up my neatly organized trash, and toss it in carelessly. I confronted my father about it, and he told me it's what he wanted. This would be a point of contention until they finally switched to a big rolling bin you couldn't organize. My dad has OCD and control issues. Answer. My mother-in-law had hoarding issues, especially around recycling. Everything had to be counted and cleaned. All plastics, bottles, and containers were washed thoroughly. Paper was sorted and bound. She had bags and bags of stuff waiting to go in the bin. When she died, we immediately began throwing out all the recycling, though it took weeks of everyone filling their bins to do it. We're still young through all the stuff she bought and collected, though. Story 2. Not my parents, but my grandparents. If they'd see you sitting and relaxing, they'd point out chores that you have to do instead. Eventually, we'd just catch it when they were about to come inside the house and start cleaning just to look busy. Story 3. My parents are from Alabama. I'm not. My dad was in the Navy, so I grew up all over. As such, they are rabid University of Alabama football fans. When I was a kid and there was a televised game in our area, I was required to be in front of the TV, festooned in Alabama gear to cheer for the team. If I refused, I got grounded. I wish I was making that up. Answer. I am a pretty big fan of the Niners and my local college team. My kids, as they have got older, have started watching some games with me, mostly just to spend some time with me, doing something they know I am into. Don't get me wrong, I spend a lot of time with them doing other things. My daughter is a Cowboy fan at 11, and my 13-year-old son is all for the Panthers. I like that they didn't pick the same team as me. Makes it more interesting. Story 4. I couldn't have any friends over. My mom was scared they would steal random stuff. 10 years later, and she still says, my friends stole her pillowcases. Answer. Well, I did have a friend steal my clothes and CD player once after a sleepover. I saw outline the of player through a plastic white bag they used since I had unique stickers on it. Couldn't believe it. Told my dad after I checked my room after they left. In the end, I got it back and never talked to them again. Shoot way to throw a several years friendship away. Anyway, if I have kids, I wouldn't ban friends despite my experience. I learned early on some people are shoot. Some people are genuine. Story 5. Wasn't allowed to watch the Smurfs when I was a child because it would invite devil spirits into our home. Story 6. No hanging anything on my walls. No posters, pictures, absolutely not allowed. I tried to compromise and put a poster on the side of my bookshelf, and it didn't last one day until she threw it in the trash while I was at school. Oh, also no friends can come over, ever. Birthday parties are family only, and I couldn't go to their houses either. So I had my first sleepover with friends after I moved out. Answer. Same here. My mom wouldn't allow any decoration when I was a kid. She said it was because the wall would get ruined, and nowadays any walls with stuff on them is so weird to me. She also didn't allow us to slam doors, saying only thugs did that, or say stupid or shut up. Same with friends or sleepovers. She didn't allow them because she said the adults would turn into pedos or something. Story 7. Over the summer, my high school gave the option of reading 2 books and writing 2 5-page reports on them. If you completed and passed, you would automatically get an A on the English midterm. Every summer, my parents would ground me and my sister until the reports were finished. The only things we were allowed to do is go to our sporting events and finish the reports. My parents weren't all that strict, but this just seemed weird. I personally would have rather taken the 2-hour midterm instead. Story 8. In our house, candles needed to be lit at least one time. This was my grandmother's rule, and she claimed it was tacky and tasteless to have a candle with an unburned wick. I grew up and went to college believing this insanity. I would quietly judge others if I saw an unburned wick on a decorative candle. I'm better now. Answer. Okay, so it's not a rule at my house or anything, but I can't stand having a candle that hasn't been burned. I have some decorative candles, but I have to light them. I have one in particular that's shaped like an egg and is in a nest, and I didn't want to ruin the egg shape by burning it, but it finally got to me, so I lit it once and immediately blew it out so the wick would be black. Story 9. No electronic devices or playing anything or reading any comics or novels during whole of the school year. Am Asian before you ask. Story 10. Don't use the good guest towels, which were always hung in the bathroom. You had to go to the linen closet to grab an everyday towel. We never had guests over anyway. Answer: fudge decorative towels. I don't get it. I also hear people that get mad when guests wipe their hands on decorative towels. I'm sorry, you hung a towel in the bathroom and I need to dry my hands? What were you expecting? I swear I was raised in a barn compared to some people. China dishes are up there too, but no one accidentally uses China BC. They're locked up in a cabinet. Story 11. I was never allowed to go to sleepovers, birthday parties, what have you. My mom forbid it because she was concerned pretty much all other parents were pedophiles. Ironic, given that she is the one with issues in trying to attract minors, projection issues. Story 12. Oh geez, let's see. No laughing and no talking loudly. Can't be in the bathroom or shower for more than 10 minutes. Had to set timer each time. They'd barge in and check after time was up. My mom was very much against self-care. Posted this in Ari to another thread here. No knives at the dinner table till I was 15 or so. We were given a weekly allowance of 5 and had to buy all of our own toiletries with it. TP, toothpaste, shampoo, etc. Couldn't use theirs or our siblings if we ran out. Kind of a good teaching method, but weird too. No soda ever. Don't drink milk. Only use it on cereal. Could only watch U-rated movies until I was 16. We had to clean a lot. My mother was very OCD. We had to clean 2 full rooms, each top to bottom down on hands and knees, scrubbing type clean each and every day, plus other choirs. Had a chart with rotating assignments. If we didn't get enough stars, we didn't get our allowance. See above. Do not accept gifts from anyone ever. Wasn't allowed to read Harry Potter because the witchcraft. Mom's rule. Funny because my dad read the first one to us as kids when it was bath time. I'm sure I'm forgetting others, but those are the first that come to mind. Story 13. My parents had a few, but my least favorite was our curfew rules. We had to be home by 9 o'clock on weekdays if we were allowed to leave, and 10 on weekends. We lived over half an hour from town, and for every minute that we were late, we got grounded for 1 week. No excuses or explanations allowed. Also to be considered home meant being inside with the door locked and all outside lights turned off. Get home on time, but stay outside with a dog for a minute before coming in. Grounded for a week. Hit a couple of unexpected red lights and get inside at 10:04. Grounded for a month. Story 14. Wasn't allowed to sit on the couch at my dad and stepmom's house. My sister and I had to sit on the floor with pillows. We would have movie night and my dad would be in his recliner. Stepmom would be on the couch with the dog and we would be on the floor. It would almost make sense if the dog hadn't been allowed on the couch instead of us. ETA, there was also a bathroom we weren't allowed to poop in. And like someone else said, we weren't allowed to use glasses for drinks. We each had a water bottle jug that we would refill and keep in the fridge. Story 15. Most of the time, the rule was just don't be disrespectful, but that was just an excuse for my dad to beat us for anything, everything, and nothing. It was just super vague, so we never know we were going to break it until we did. And once we did, we generally didn't know what exactly the thing we did wrong was. Edit, autocorrect. Story 16. We were absolutely not allowed to eat at McDonald's, my dad's rule. So every month or so, my mom would pick me up from school early on a Friday and would go to McDonald's. Honestly, one of my favorite childhood memories. Then when I moved out for university, I gorged myself on McDonald's. Forbidding things is not a good parenting tactic, just makes it all the more appealing, which has me questioning my ban on TikTok for my 2 kids. Nah. Answer. See, my kids have issues with food and fast food doesn't agree with them. They can have the French fries, but the chicken absolutely wreaks havoc. So it's not a blanket ban, it's just only occasionally French fries. When they are older, go for it. I don't care because I'm not the one dealing with the fallout from their bodies not liking it, but they are still young enough that I get called in the bathroom, so no, not happening. Story 17. We were only allowed to use the computer for 30 minutes a day, even for homework, but could play as many video games on the PlayStation and watch as much TV as we wanted. I don't understand to this day. Story 18. My best friend in high school was not allowed to come home after midnight, which meant if it was 11:45 p.m. and we were 20 minutes away from her house, she would have to scramble to find somewhere to stay for the night. That or make absolute sure she was home before midnight, which is no fun when you're 18 years old. I think it was something about either not wanting to be woken up by her coming in or worrying that they would think someone was breaking in. I honestly don't remember. All I remember is her sleeping on my floor a lot. Edit. I completely forgot to add that while I understand having a curfew and midnight isn't bad, it was the fact that they would tell her to not come home at all. Wouldn't you want your teenage daughter home safe? That was the part that really got me, as my mom didn't care what time I came home because it meant I was home, where she knew I was safe, not at some random person's house sleeping on their floor. Story 19. Mom wouldn't let me read Harry Potter because it had magic. She also wouldn't let me watch the How to Train a Dragon movie series because apparently dragons were associated with the devil. She is a devout Catholic. Yet she had no problem with me reading The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings or watching Dragon Tales. Answer: I'm 35 years old, and less than 1 year ago, my mother randomly told me that she didn't want me and my sister reading Harry Potter as kids. Her reason? I don't know if you know this, Spagata, but Harry Potter is the occult. What the fudge does that mean, Mom? It's not of God. It is not of Jesus. Mom, we are Jews. You took me to temple. You had me bat mitzvah head. You sent me to Hebrew school and paid tuition on a private Jewish day school. You sent me to Jewish summer camp. Harry Potter is not of Jesus. It's the occult, yet she didn't seem to have any issue with my younger sister reading it. Story 20. I wasn't allowed to have short hair. Female. I'm talking about shorter than shoulder blade length. My dad doesn't care, son. My mom vehemently dislikes seeing me with short hair to the point of screaming matches about it. This is the only thing she has an issue with. She's very set to the idea that since she as youth didn't get to do and try cool things with her body, I should be able to. She's all for things like dyeing hair and tasteful tattoos. I spent a year during high school convincing her into letting me get it cut to at least a bob. One day while out with her, I idly wondered aloud if our super fun favorite hairdresser at a cost cutters was working. She snapped and shouted that if I wanted it so bad we were driving over and doing it now or I could never mention it again. I agreed, and she angrily drove me over and glared from her seat as my mid-back hair was cut to a long pixie. Donated it too. When we returned home, she locked herself in her bedroom and refused to come out or talk to anyone for 2 days. Kicked my sister out of the house when she visited and ignored Dad's calls while he was in Canada. I loved the cut so much that I kept my hair that short for 6 years before I got bored and grew it out again. To this day, when I ask why she doesn't like my hair short, she gets incredibly mad and refuses to talk about it. Answer: I know a person whose mom does this. Just the opposite. She wants to grow out her hair so she can donate it, and she has gorgeous hair at that. Thick, smooth, shiny. Her mom constantly complains about how ugly the long hair looks on her and keeps demanding she cuts it. The girl is in her 20s now, and still her mom believes she gets to decide what her daughter does with her hair. She even went as far as instructing the barber beforehand to ignore her daughter's choice and cut it short anyway. I just don't get why she is so obsessed with her daughter's hair. Just, why mind your own darn hair? Story 21. No Dragon Ball Z, or any anime for that matter, because those cartoons are made to recruit kids into Satanism. My friend Carol sent me a Hotmail chain about it. Story 22. My mom forbid me from wearing clothes with cherries on them. When I asked her why, she just said, you know what it means. Story 23. Only 30 minutes of video games a day. This was back when every video game had a load screen every couple minutes. Answer: I could only talk on the telephone to one friend a night for 10 minutes. Then they made me hang up. I could only talk to boys once on the phone just prior to the weekend for date plans. I couldn't call any boys, and this included up until my wedding day for my fiance. Oh, and we had an old black rotary wall phone situated between the kitchen and living room so they could hear everything. They were shocked and indignant when Ma Bell came and took that old black phone away, LOL. Appalled they had to buy a phone. And BTW, I was terrible from the time I hit the door on Friday night through Saturday night. But church twice on Sundays and once on Wednesdays. But I turned out okay in the end. Sure didn't raise my kid like that. Church of Christ, the gift that keeps on quitting. Story 24. I couldn't bring girls to my house when I was a teenager. Unnecessary rule, since I didn't have girlfriends at that age. Story 25. I wasn't allowed to paint my fingernails anything other clear or clear with sparkles until I was like 15. Absolutely no idea why, but even to this day, I dislike having my nails painted. Story 26. They made me play outside like a real kid every day during the summer. I legit wasn't allowed inside unless it was pouring down rain or 100 degrees. Story 27. Friend of mine told me his parents spanked him and his siblings until each one lived in his or her own place. Still had other forms of punishment, but if they felt it was necessary, it didn't matter if the child was old enough to vote. Dad would whip out the belt. From what I heard, they're still close. Story 28. No TV other than early evening Saturdays and Sundays. The idea was that we should do homework or revision or read. I still read all the time and never watch TV for over 50 years now. Story 29. Age 10 wouldn't give me money to buy Pokemon cards. Age 15 would give me money for cigarettes. Didn't end up getting into Pokemon, but I'm still a smoker. Story 30. Me and my older brother were categorically not allowed to eat McDonald's food when we were younger because our parents dislike it. We missed out on countless birthday parties, etc. My parents even hooked me from going on a rugby tour when I was 10 because there was a McDonald's near the campsite. Needless to say, there was only one place we were going when my brother got his driver's license. Story 31. I know of a family that still don't allow their adult children to have a Facebook or Instagram account. They'd always been a bit suspicious of social media anyway, but even when the kids turned 18, the parents didn't let up on their rule. No, not even allow their kid to have an account, and they'd friend them like a lot of people my age on Facebook do. One of them has a secret Facebook account under an alias as a result, so I guess that rule has failed. Oddly enough, that same family has no objection to other services such as PlayStation Network and YouTube, which I guess is social media in a way, as their kids have accounts on there, but for some reason they have a problem with Facebook and Instagram. It just baffles me, in all honesty. Story 32. My family was completely anti-electronics until we got to high school. Then we got a Firefly, which was capable of calling 4 numbers: home, parents' cells, an emergency number. It changed when iPhones came out and schools began incorporating those into their classes. Answer: I'm so old, I could not believe my son when he said phones were allowed in class. Oh no, because they certainly weren't allowed when I went to school, so he must be trying to pull a fast one. Yes, those were my exact words. So my dumbass actually goes to the school to speak with the principal and bust my son. At the end of that little meeting, I was looked at and felt like the grade A asshat I was. I also upgraded my son's phone so he could stay on track in school. It was really to try to wash some of the shoot off my face. Story 33. My dad had a rule of no talking at the table. It led to me learning how to eat quickly and just get away from the table. Today I enjoy eating with friends and my family because we talk, laugh, and enjoy ourselves and become closer. Story 34. I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, JW, so I have plenty. No Christmas, no Easter. Those two at least make sense as their religious celebrations. No birthdays, not even allowed to say happy birthday to people. Go to others, kids' birthday parties, eat birthday cake. I didn't celebrate a birthday through my entire childhood. No, after school activities or weekend sports, no friends unless they were JDWs as well. So 2 other kids in my school. No TV or movies that had magic or demons or stuff like that. Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, etc. Had to attend church, they call them meetings, 3 times a week and go out door knocking, witnessing, at least once a week, plus heaps of other BS. And if I wanted to leave, also had to say goodbye to my family and friends. If anyone leaves, all the remaining JWs will shun them. The JWs are a terrible cult. Answer: my husband was raised J, but luckily his family and their particular church are fairly lenient for witnesses. They don't formally celebrate anything, but yesterday they did BBQ and just hang out, and they don't shun anyone for leaving. And my husband and his brother were heavily into sports in high school, received gifts near their birthday and stuff, even if they didn't have any sort of celebration. My MIL did recently piss me off when my 4-year told me she said God would be mad at him when I made him cupcakes for his birthday. It's fine if she doesn't wish to celebrate or tell him happy birthday or get him a gift, but who says that to a toddler? Story 35. If I find adult content in the house, we will critique it together. She never found my adult content. Story 36. My parents were honestly pretty chill. They would have reasonable punishments and money as a reward, but I do know that my cousins would get slapped if they had gum. I was on a Zoom call with them, and one of them was chewing gum. And my aunt just slapped her right then and there and said, "Where did you get that unpermitted gum?" I just sat there looking at them in complete silence. Story 37. I wasn't allowed to watch Happy Days. This is back when it was on its original run in the 70s, because my mom thought Fonzie snapping his fingers and all the girls immediately running to his side to coo over him was sexist and demeaning to women. And I mean, she's not wrong, but it was a weird hill to die on, especially since I was a voracious reader and she didn't limit what I was allowed to read at all. So picture me not being allowed to watch Fonzie, but I could read all the graphic intimacy that Sidney Sheldon and Judith Krantz could dream up to my heart's content. Story 38. No boys were allowed on my bed, except they bought me a couch to have in my room so they could have an appropriate place to sit. The poor couch was fudge on so many times it broke. Story 39. Wasn't allowed to lock my door until I left for college. My parents were absolute control freaks, and I still harbor deep resentment to this day. Story 40. 1. You can inly marry someone which is from our home country and has the same religion. No intimacy before marriage. 3. No partying, drinking ever. You are a girl, you have to be at home at latest at 4 p.m. 5. You're not allowed to hug boys, have male friends. You have to be a good housewife and have to be able to cook and allowed to speak against your man and cook and clean for him on M15 and a in-the-closet, open-minded atheist. Gosh, they would dislike me if I would tell them. And for anyone before they even ask, no, I can't ever tell them. Story 41. It's not really a rule, but my mom was always against graphic novels and wouldn't really let me read them that much or buy them at school book fairs because she thought they weren't hard enough and enriching enough or something. I'm really good at reading and stuff, so it wasn't really an issue to read a graphic novel once in a while. Story 42. When I was in kindergarten, I wasn't allowed to say the phrase, oh man. When my parents came to school, they would tell anyone who said that phrase not to. Still not entirely clear on why. Story 43. Big chocolate bars and large soda bottles were banned in my house by my mom. We were only allowed to get smaller packs of junk food so that it could not be had any time of the day and we wouldn't be tempted. It did help limiting how much junk food I ate. Story 44. No MTV, all the unsolved mysteries, X-Files, and R-rated horror flicks in the world, but MTV was unfathomable. Snuck it anyway. The highlight being that I caught the premiere of the Vines music video for Get Free and thought Fudge Yes Rock is back. Story 45. No cartoons at all unless pre-approved by my mom, which was very, very few. She didn't mind things like Disney movies, and if they were actually educational, she was fine. But anything on Cartoon Network was out, and we could only ever watch stuff like SpongeBob if my dad was watching, because it's hard to tell your kids you can't watch that if their dad is. We could watch absolutely anything if our parents were watching, even if it was R-rated. But cartoons? Oh no. Answer: I was only allowed to watch Disney made by Walt Disney. Anything newer than his passing was considered inspired by Satan to my Christian parents. I think I was an adult by the time I saw The Lion King. Old Disney is super racist, which was a bonus to my dad, and being told everything else was evil actually broke my faith in the end because it was so obviously a lie based on subjective hatred. It also meant that because nothing was allowed, I watched everything I wanted to see in secret, including things I shouldn't have, wasn't ready for. Story 46. Till passing do we part. They were unhappily married for decades. I was so glad when they finally abandoned that rule. Story 47. I couldn't watch or read any piece of media where the main characters were high schoolers. To my parents, all high schoolers do is smoke, drink, party, and fudge. So this meant no Victorious, iCarly, Drake Josh, etc. They had to look up any book I wanted to read, and if the main characters were in high school, I'd automatically be banned from reading it. This rule eventually dropped when I got to high school. Story 48. No video games ever. I was only allowed to play games when I turned 13, and only for 1 hour per week, and only on a weekend. Now I'm 18, I play games 6-7 hours a day. I've made about 4 independent games and have helped design, create, and developed about 14 games in total. Story 49. I wasn't allowed to play outside past the driveway unless there was a parental figure or guardian watching me, nor could I visit friends' houses or hang out with friends after school. And my family wonders why I grew up to have 0 social skills and a non-existent social life. Story 50. No boys' toys, ever. I remember being 6 and wanting Hot Wheels for Christmas more than anything in the world. I got a Barbie van and glitter eyeshadow and was told cars were for boys, and I didn't want to be weird like that. Story 51. We were not allowed to watch television until I was in 11th grade. We had one, but it was locked up by some device that clamped on the electric cord to prevent plugging it in. Answer: my mom bought that lock too, so we couldn't watch after school, and she thought it would give her control. But in 10 men the first day we had pliers and got it unlocked. When we heard the garage door, we'd put the lock back on. She found out one time when she cannoned faster than usual and just gave up on locking the TV since it was pointless. She asked when we figured out how to unlock it, and we fessed up that we'd been doing it since the first day. She wasn't mad, just disappointed that she didn't have the control she thought she did. She also wouldn't let us watch The Simpsons because she thought Bart was a brat and she didn't want us getting any ideas from the show. Story 52. I couldn't watch Ben 10, SpongeBob, Phineas and Ferb, and some other shows. I still watched them cause Fudge that noise, but it made no sense. Story 53. Wasn't allowed to pick my own friends, didn't own a TV for 4 years because TV was made by the devil, no rock music, not allowed to go anywhere with my guy friends because they knew what guys are like, and I was a teenage girl. Also, no two-piece swimwear. When trying on dresses skirts, had to bend over, and if mom could see my thighs at all, the dress was too short. Answer: my parents, probably mostly my mom, had the dumbest dress code and never even told us what the rules were. I dressed and felt like garbage for years because the clothes I thought were cute were too revealing. The only shorts I could wear were Bermuda shorts, which are hideous, so I wore jeans instead. All summer. No two-piece swimwear either. Even when I grew up and had boobs, my mom bought me a one-piece with no semblance of support or anything. The ironic part is that one-pieces usually end up revealing more because they stretch out and show your chest and crotch. But at least your stomach is covered. Story 54. Still not allowed to play M games? Our movies are fine. She never gives a reason. Other than that, she's amazing though. Story 55. Not talking back, yet apparently I am supposed to explain myself at the same time. And no makeup until, well, further notice, I guess. I'm 18 now and still don't even own lipstick. Even when I put on a colored gloss, my mom would cringe and tell me to take it off, insisting I remain a child. But now I think I'm the only girl in my school who has never had a full face of makeup on, or even light eyeshadow and liner apart from my first and only prom last year, when a neighbor did it for me. Story 56. Well, currently it's not a rule, but my parents are constantly on their phones, and if I have mine for more than a few minutes in front of my dad, he gives me a look. Occasionally, he claims what he does is more important than what I do on my phone. Story 57. There was a special white couch that no one was allowed to sit on. The excuse was that it was the guest couch and only guests could sit on it. Well, we learned that shoot was false when we had guests over, and they were instructed to only sit in the chairs or on the other adjacent white couch. One time a guest sat on the wrong guest couch and my mother flipped out and kicked them out of the dinner party. No idea what her deal was with that couch. Maybe it was for extra special guests? We had a similar rule for a certain set of guest towels. We weren't allowed to use them, but she also never put them out for guests and used another different set of guest towels that we also weren't allowed to use. Story 58. I wasn't allowed to go to or host sleepovers when I was young because I was a girl and all my friends were girls. Story 59. I wasn't allowed to wear actual clothes at home. I had to wear pajamas. Parents didn't want me wearing holes or getting stains on my school clothes. Story 60. I had to sing in church. I wasn't in choir or anything like sing down in the congregation next to my parents, or I was grounded until I started to sing. Story 61. I'm frickin' 17 and my parents still won't let me have a sleepover with my friends, but my brother gets to go camping in the woods for 3 days with all of his friends. Whack! Story 62. My mom thought it was inappropriate to say fart, and still does. I'm allowed to say it, but until I was around 12, she wouldn't let me. Couldn't say bloody either, but that one's more understandable. Story 63. I needed to wear special orthopedic shoes growing up. My mom would literally never allow me to wear other shoes. It didn't matter what I was wearing or doing. I always had to have those shoes on. Story 64. My parents have this app called Life 360 on my phone. They track my movements and how fast I drive. I understand why, but I also have never gotten caught doing anything to break their trust or get in trouble to the point where it's necessary. Honestly, it can fudge my social life sometimes. I still have great friends and I can work around it to party, but my friends like to go out a lot, so I pre-game with them and end up staying at the house of whatever friend I'm crashing with and play video games or watch YouTube till they get back. I've learned to deal with it, and if I really want to, I can go out, but it's usually just not worth it. I'm still very close with my friends, but sometimes it's clear that they are closer with each other than me, and I blame it on the app. There is an upside, though. It makes it very easy to avoid situations I don't want to put myself in. For example, if they are going hella far away, or to a party that's going to get shut down, or if somebody tipsy is driving, I can tell them I can't go and they won't push it. Story 65. I lived with my dad and stepmom from ages 12, 16, and these were some of the many. I couldn't bring any drink outside of the kitchen, even if it was water. Couldn't have a blanket on the couch. Couldn't take a nap on the couch. I had to ask if I could have a snack, and if so, what it was I wanted. Getting seconds of anything at dinner was frowned upon. Story 66. At the end of a meal, we had to say, "May I leave the table, please? I have had sufficient. Thank you very much for a very nice meal," before we could get down. Story 67. No whistling in the house. It's a Russian superstition that whistling inside makes your money disappear. Story 68. My mother refused to let me shave my legs until I was 18. It took the neighbor lady metaphorically smacking her upside the head before she relented. Story 69. Don't use the third kitchen work surface. It should always be clean and only used if you absolutely need to. If you make toast, crouch down in line with the work surface to make sure you get every last crumb. Story 70. On vacation, I was only allowed either breakfast or lunch, plus dinner. So if I ate breakfast, I had to skip lunch. And no, it wasn't to save money. I had 2 siblings, but the rule was only for me, and only on vacation. Story 71. No Disney Channel shows. They would blame all the kids on Disney Channel if we were misbehaving. Said we learned it from them. Story 72. Not allowed to chew gum. Also not allowed people round in case my friends stole my dad's vinyl records. Like what? Story 73. They wouldn't let me and my cousin, she is like my sister basically, go out of the gated garden. We weren't even allowed to go to the store, which is like 3 nights away. And they wouldn't let me go to my friends' birthday parties, so they never came to mine. Still to this day, I'm 16, and none of my friends attended to my birthdays. And my birthday being on July didn't help. Story 74. Cracks knuckles. Harry Potter was a huge deal as I live in the Bible Belt. Had my own room at my dad's, but my stepmom wouldn't let me go into my room until it was time to sleep. Also had a TV with cable, but wasn't allowed to watch anything in my room for the same reason, which basically forced me to watch The Young and the Restless and all the other soaps. It was hell as I also done all the chores humanly possible. Found out later, it wasn't my stepmom who was the bad guy, solely, but as my dad worked all day, I never realized it was his doing too. Apparently, he was so worried I'd go to my room and watch adult content and self-care. Makes no sense. My mom and stepdad were more chill, but me being grounded for leaving a sock in the bathroom still gets me to this day. To be fair though, I had a problem about forgetting my clothes in the bathroom and was told a lot, and I did in fact learn not to, but I guess I just dropped a sock. Got grounded for a while, which sucks, because I almost missed out on my first date ever, but luckily talked them into it. Story 75. Not my parents, but when I was in elementary school back in the 90s, our neighbors had 2 kids around the same ages of my brother and myself. We would go over their house and play Doom in their computer room, and we would get up to a certain level, and they would shut the game off, and we'd have to go do something else. They told us that they weren't allowed to get further in the game than their dad was, or else he would get mad and they would get punished. Story 76. Absurd by today's standards, but pretty common when I was young. Our main rule was simply dinner at 6:30, the meaning being that on weekends and summertime, they wanted us out of the house and to go have fun. Take risks. We'd ride our bikes miles from home without a worry, as long as we were back by a certain time. There'd be hell to pay if we were late, but otherwise it was see ya. Story 77. My mom never talked about intimacy. When I was like 10, I asked her how she got pregnant. She said, I don't know. Story 78. I only recently found out that these rules were indeed not normal. To me, it was perfectly reasonable to never have friends over, to have a whole room in the house that was literally never entered, and to never have a best friend. Neither me nor any of my siblings were allowed to be too close to anyone, including each other. We were raised to be suspicious of everything. Needless to say, we never had friends over. We could never go to another friend's house. All homework was to be done within half an hour of returning home. And if it wasn't finished then, we slept outside. Every Sunday, the kids set to work cleaning every solid surface in the house. Every Friday, our parents would leave at 5 in the morning and return around midnight. They told us it was to make us independent. They did this even when my siblings and I were newborns. We had to share one horrible thing about that day every night at dinner, and if we took more than a few seconds to respond, we were screamed at for not being realistic. We were never permitted to smile, ever. It was explicitly against the rules. We only ever talked to each other, and once again, were not allowed to do so for very long. Friends? Fat chance. Boyfriend? Forget it. Every year, each of us was tested for our IQs by our parents, and if any of them were deemed too low, we slept outside. Oh, their worst days, our parents would get mad at us for following directions too easily when asked to do something by our parents, and were berated with my mother saying something along the lines of trusting your own parents way too much. Never owned a TV. Bringing up anything from school was considered rude to the other kids at school. Telling anyone else at school about our home life was rude. This was part of the reason why I never knew of any of this being out of the ordinary until I recently moved out. Looking back, I know they never drank. In positive, they never did substances. I honestly don't know what caused their erratic and sometimes maniac behavior. If anyone has a guess, I'd be open to anything. TLDR. 1. You screw up, you sleep outside. 2. Never trust anyone, not even your parents. Story 79. This will probably be buried, but my mom had a rule where she would filter all children cartoons, shows, movies for me and my brother. Examples of shows we were not allowed to watch. 1. Pokemon taught us to over-celebrate and brag. 2. Power Rangers. Mom didn't want us to like punching and kicking. I now officiate martial arts professionally. 3. Wrestling WCW above. 4. The Golden Compass. Sacrilegious. 5. Harry Potter didn't match with the Bible. Passion of the Christ was totally okay, though. Story 80. Not a thing that is just in my home. It's there in most of the homes that I have gone to. There are many things in house which are useful, but they do not use them. Why? So that it will always be neat and tidy when guests see them. I have wondered all my life, why do people spend money on something useful only to be kept unused for others to see? I mean, it will obviously lose its shiny look if it's used. It's almost like making money then stacking it up on the countertop for others to see and not use it. Story 81. I couldn't say words like stupid or dumb until middle school. You want to know how I convinced my dad to let me say it? I had to come up with a situation where I would accidentally say it in front of him and his now ex-girlfriend, pretend to be all sorry and explain to her that I couldn't say bad words, and watch her convince him to let me, his almost teenage daughter, say dumb. Story 82. No SpongeBob SquarePants. Now, many people had this rule, but everyone is shocked when I tell them SpongeBob SquarePants was a swear word in my house, and you'd lose TV privileges for saying it. Also, I'm 14 and can't say stupid, dislike, or sucks. I love my mom a lot, but it's 100 her rules, as my dad swears when it's just him and me in the car. My mom says I can't say them because she doesn't want my little brother, 7, going to be 8 in a couple weeks, to say stupid. My sister and I were once tied together with ribbons. Both arms and legs were tied to the other person's arms and legs because we fought about something. No video games for a month because I misunderstood something my sister said. Apologizing was useless when I was younger because I was told sorry isn't good enough. Now I apologize for everything, even if nothing happened. I was about 4. I forgot one question on a homework assignment, and I was banned me from going to my best friend's birthday party and grounded for a month. Every time I ask to hang out with friends, my parents yell. I feel awful for being so flaky with my friends. I'm just glad they understand. No extra money on hair products. I have curly hair, and I was forced to brush my hair with a fine-tooth comb while it was dry before school. I looked really stupid every day of 6th grade. I still have to brush my hair with a fine-tooth comb, but I'm allowed to do so when it's wet now. There are some more, but I've already bored all of you. My dad told me that he's made some mistakes as a parent, but hopes he'll remember the good parts because he's learning too. My mom is an incredible mom too. I think right now my parents have made such an improvement from where they used to be, and I love them dearly. I wish sometimes they'd apologize when they do something wrong, but even without that, I'm grateful they're my parents. Story 83. Couldn't watch PG-13 movies until after I was 13, and my parents tried to keep me on a bedtime schedule in high school. Put my foot down on that one, lol. Story 84. No snacks or junk food of any kind ever, with the sole exception of crisps for lunch on Friday and a fun-sized chocolate bar when we got in from school. It wasn't bad to be healthy, but it was the strictness of it. I remember once my mom got really mad when I tried to sneak a chocolate bar into my bag to take to school, telling me, then 7, I'd get fat and have a heart attack. As a result, I was underweight as a teenager and spent several years working through my food issues. Story 85. I lived with my grandpa, and he had a rule that every one of my friends who came over had to rub his lucky coin. Story 86. My childhood was pretty fudge up, but I'll share some of the rules, bearing in mind these rules didn't change until after I moved out at 18 and were still enforced when I would visit to say hi. Bedroom door never allowed to be closed. Same with bathroom. Toilet was okay to close, but if you were on the toilet and dad came up to use it, you had to get off immediately because you would get punished for making him wait. We weren't allowed to say fart. We had to say Trump. And if my dad heard you fart, you were sent to the toilet. I did all of the cooking, cleaning, and washing starting from about age 8. You weren't allowed to open a new pack of anything or finish a pack of anything without permission. Only allowed a bath on a Sunday night. Everyone took turns in the same bathwater, oldest first. My dad would go literal months between baths and said deodorant was for poo afters. Teeth were only brushed while in the bath using the bathwater. I was the second youngest of 4 kids, see previous rule. When I got a paper round as a kid, and as soon as I left school, had to get a job, 23 of my wages went to my mom for rent. I worked 4 days a week and barely had enough money to pay bus fares to college and was expected to buy my own clothes, toiletries, and anything else I needed for myself. The first item of clothing I ever owned that hadn't belonged to anyone else first, including underwear, jumble sales mostly, was a t-shirt I bought for $1 when I was 17, and I had to skip lunch to pay for it. If I managed to persuade my parents to let me go out after school, then I could never go far because I had to be home before 5 to cook the tea. When I met my now husband, I was 17 and I would go to his house, a 5-minute walk from mine, and stay for the day, but had to go home at mealtimes to cook, even if I was eating with my boyfriend's family. We weren't allowed to go in our bedrooms until bedtime and had to stay in the living room where my dad was watching TV constantly and chain smoking. We weren't allowed to play with toys when we were little because they made too much noise and he didn't like to be disturbed. We had the Argos catalog to look through over and over again. My husband was endlessly impressed by my ability to open the catalog straight away to the right page for anything I wanted to look at, a skill sadly not needed anymore because of search bars. There's more, but it's 2 a.m. I'm quite well adjusted now, all things considered. I've had a hell of a lot of therapy and spent most of my 20s in a tragic end haze, but am finally happy. Both my parents have died, and out of my 3 siblings, I only have contact with one sister who only texts at Christmas. Told doctor, I was neglected and harmful behavior my whole childhood. Am now in my mid-30s, an orphan, married, and a mother, and finally happy. Story 87. We lived in deep West Texas, and we weren't allowed to wear shorts or go swimming unless the temperature was over 90 degrees F. But Dad, it's 88 degrees and everyone is having a pool party. Nope, sorry, not 90 degrees. Now go mow the lawn. Story 88. I already know this will get buried, but I've got a few. I wasn't allowed to watch SpongeBob as a kid. It was just that specific show for some reason, and something about it rotting our brains. Wasn't allowed to go to sleepovers until well into high school. This one isn't that strange, but I thought it was applicable. I guess this is the main one here. It's not so much the rule itself as the enforcement of it for how little I actually did. I think I was in 5th grade, just barely entering middle school. In our house, there was a big no adult content rule. That's not really an issue. The thing is, my mother had a rather broad definition of adult content. You know that Lego Star Wars game with Lego Princess Leia on the front in her golden bikini? That qualified as adult content to her. We had the game for only a few days before we had to throw it away because she couldn't mentally handle her sons being around adult content like that. I was like 6 at the time, and the oldest child. Anyways, cue me now around 10 and just barely starting to get curious about that kind of stuff. I remember seeing some girl in a bikini on my iPod and telling my mom about it. She tried to be understanding, but anyone could tell she was disturbed by this. I'm not sure what it was inside of me. Just an actual curiosity, some kind of rebelliousness, or just exercising what new power I found I had. But day after day, I had another confession for her. Each time I was genuinely afraid for my soul and my skin, but I knew she had promised that my punishment would be less if I confessed and told her about what I was going through. Mom, I had a bad thought. Mom, I watched a TV show and the girl was in a bikini. I felt incredibly guilty every time I would slip up and felt the label of adult content addict on me when I was literally not even old enough to know why these images were an issue in the first place. It finally came to a head when I looked up erotic, a new word I had learned, and saw some of the images of completely naked women. I walked home, my legs wobbly and my head light. Mom, I started. What is it? She said, putting on a fake smile. She knew what was coming from the pattern of confession I had set up. I looked up erotic on the school computer today, and I saw some bad pictures that I know you wouldn't. She cut me off yelling and just sent me to my room. As a punishment, I wound up being put under a quarantine. I would wake up, go to school, and then spend the rest of the day in my room. I could go and use the bathroom, but that was it. I lived like that for a whole 2 months before my penance was paid. I read a lot of books during that time and drew lots of pictures. Sleeping was always welcome. This was apparently a mercy because you confess so it won't be 3 months. Something in my brain, in my inner workings, definitely broke because of that experience. Intimacy, I struggled a lot growing up. Because of suppression and the guilt that had been ingrained into me, when I did start exploring that realm of life more intensely, I fell into a serious depression and planned to eliminate myself just to stop making mistakes and slipping up. I'm all good now, and believe it or not, so is my mom. She was struggling just like the rest of us, and I don't hold anything against her. She's made a full 180 from crying in the grocery store aisle about the women in the magazines wearing bikinis to wearing a bikini herself to the beach, which is huge in our culture, and even becoming a bit of a nudist, but that's a different story. She had her own repression and suppression in her life and is just coming out of that now. As for me, I'm still wrestling with who I am and what I really believe concerning some of those topics like chastity, repentance, and what God actually wants us to experience in this life. I don't believe that living in fear is right, though, and I'm doing much better now than I was doing before. I think this is a serious topic that is practically never talked about. In church, there is always the talk about how we need to be chaste and virtuous, but we never talk about how everything has its season, time, and purpose. A time to refrain from those things, sure, But there's also a time to open yourself to sexuality and be a hoe who wants something. Yeah, I said it. You're allowed to be a slur for your husband. Fear in general, but specifically fear of being controlled by others, by intimacy desires, by God, and by themselves plays a big part in many of the internal conflicts I've seen in the people I know as far as sexuality goes. Living in fear is no fun. It can be super damaging to people, and in religious societies, there needs to be a change in the way we address sexuality with one another. It screwed my mom over. In turn, it screwed me over. There was so much fear around sexuality that any good intentions she had were overshadowed by it. Maybe most of the people reading this, if anyone reads this, will think, this guy is a private area. Just don't tell your mom. And to that, this message is clearly not for you. Go out and be intimacy-free. Slay some private area, my guy. But to those who resonate with this message, my main point is that we are products of our environment, but only to a point. There comes a time in our lives where we get a certain awareness and know some things for ourselves. Don't let fear rule you. Figure stuff out. Decide for yourself what constitutes as adult content and why certain things make you uncomfortable without assigning arbitrary labels like, because it's bad, without explanation applicable to you specifically. Eve had to eat the apple in order to bring people into existence, which was God's plan all along. And best I can figure, God sent us here to learn how to be happy. Be happy. Not afraid. Learn and grow. Don't let past traumas define you and who you will become unless it's in ways that actually contribute to your happiness. God, I love you guys. Don't be too hard on yourselves. Story 89. My dad had this obsession with the bathroom. I'd get up for school in the morning and go into the bathroom to brush my teeth, and he'd be demanding what the fudge I was doing and why was it taking so long. Duh. We were also not allowed to be in the bathroom during the day, only in the morning for showers and such. We also had to keep our toothbrushes and razors in your own rooms or risk him using them. Hygiene man, because it was his house and all stuff was his. Story 90. No phone in my room. Great idea until you realize that whenever I was at a friend's house or we were in the hotel on vacation, me and my siblings would basically never leave and never learn that if we stay up until 2 a.m. the day before a test, we would suffer. So we never learned how to self-regulate. One time, my stepdad gave my little brother unlimited time to play Minecraft after a Big Little Luge baseball game. He stayed up all night. I left him playing and then came down to see him still playing. He was made to get off and then slept on the couch until 2 because of how tired he was. Learning how to self-regulate is important. Those kinds of restrictions do not help in the long run. Story 91. We could not find an easier way to do anything. If we had a chore to do, we could only do it their way, even if our way took less time and was more efficient. If we broke this rule, we had to start everything over. Story 92. Some very strange copyright rules. I had a camcorder my mom gave me, one of the old tape ones, and I wasn't allowed to film anything that is public property. I once showed her a tape where I filmed an advertising banner, and she went crazy about copyright. X200B. Also, no flash photography of my dad's computer monitor. Have no idea why. I used to think it was my parents being concerned of me being photosensitive or something, but I swear I remember taking flash pictures of other things with no problem. X200B. Also, I once said Allah in public in a reference to the War of the Worlds, and my mom scolded me for being rude. I didn't shout it out or anything. Story 93. Whatever grade point average I got my first quarter in high school was the standard for the rest of my schooling, meaning if I got less than that, I would not be allowed to have my cell phone, play video games, or hang out with friends outside of school. I got a 99 my first quarter and only matched it one other quarter for all of high school. Story 94. No Simpsons, adult jokes that would have flown over our heads anyway. No watching Pokemon, except for one time when my younger brother was 6 or 7 and sick with the stomach flu. He had a small collection of Pokemon cards. No password on any of my personal devices, even if I tell them what it is. Has resulted in a couple of my friends taking my phone and doing things I don't like, knowing I can't do anything about it. Sometimes they would even put a password on it themselves. No leaving the table until everyone is done eating. In elementary, my 3 younger brothers and I, were forced to be in the kids' choir. The first year I wasn't, 9th grade, they made an age cap of 6th grade. I was the tallest, and I've always been short and oldest in the whole choir for a couple of years, and I was very aware of it. Very self-conscious and insecure about what the other girls my age thought, especially with the actions and kiddish lyrics. It did lead me to love singing, though. Story 95. I don't know if this counts as a rule, but we had absolutely no rules. I could do what I wanted whenever I wanted, and never harmful behavior my freedom. Story 96. Not me, but my student asked me to be allowed to use her phone in class. I was like, WTF, no, in my head, but asked her if it was an emergency. She flat out told me she had to call her dad and let him know her period started. Major red flags were going off in my head. Sent her to guidance and reported. Got a call from dad saying he had the right to know everything about his daughter's menstrual cycle and told me I needed to call him immediately when it did. How am I supposed to know? I wish this wasn't true. This wasn't the only thing I reported to child services, and I hope the young lady is okay. Story 97. When I was 17, my mom gave me an Easter basket with a 12-pack of condoms in it. When my boyfriend came over, though, we had to have the door open at all times. So you want to watch? LOL. Story 98. I remember when I was a kid, 5 to 6 years old, my dad would say, if you ever hit me, there will be 2 hits after that. You hitting the floor and the ambulance hitting 100, taking you to the hospital. It was so strange for him to say. He wasn't harmful behavior at all, and I was only spanked as a child once or twice growing up. I think it was just the Marine in him, or maybe something my grandfather had said to him. Just seems so violent to say to a little kid. Story 99. Back when me and my family was living with the devil, aka my stepdad, he made a rule where us kids wasn't allowed to eat after a certain amount of time. So I usually snuck out of my room just to eat some midnight snacks. Story 100. Only allowed 1 pop and 1 piece of candy a week. No phones in our rooms, and they were gone through once a week at least. My phone always has a complex code now. Couldn't have more than 1 set of shampoo, conditioner, and body wash in the shower, and the shower couldn't be over 10 mins without pounding on the door and screaming before they'd shut the water heater off. If we had any friends over, our doors had to be wide open. Couldn't even be slightly closed over, or we would have to play in the living room, and we had an open floor plan house. Story 101. I wasn't allowed to go over my friends' houses or have my friends over. Even my friend who was right across the street from me, or from me literally 20 feet away. I wasn't allowed to walk around my block by myself until well past the age of 13. I couldn't go on school trips. Couldn't stay for after-school activities. I lived a very sheltered life, and I dislike it. Story 102. Probably not the worst on here, but growing up, my mom made up this rule that if I were to go on a date with a guy one day, the next date had to be with a different guy entirely. She told me and my sisters it was so that we wouldn't get tied down to any one guy. As if I couldn't even get one guy to ask me out. She had a lot of funky and outdated dating rule. Story 103. Any kind of service person that came to our house, I had to offer to help. Each of them just kind of looked at me, then looked at my mom to see if she was serious, and then, probably for my sake, said no, they're good. Story 104. My friend's dad wrote 4 emails to Apple to strengthen their parental controls so that all apps be banned, even calling and messaging. X200B, no response of course, but I was like, WTF. Story 105. No video games. It got to the point where I had $1,700, money that I had earned, sitting in cash in my nightstand because all I wanted to do was buy an Xbox to play Xbox Live with the guys at my school, so I wouldn't feel left out. It got to the point where my parents would ask me what I was going to spend it on or encourage me to buy other things with it, and I'd just shrug and say I had no interest in buying anything other than an Xbox. Story 106. My mom had this rule where I was only allowed gaming for 1 hour. This made getting through the story of games really difficult considering I was a dumb kid and kept failing missions. Story 107. My wife's father would wrap a chain around the refrigerator and lock it from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. The pantry also had a key lock and was locked during the same time. When they needed to use the restroom, he would divvy out a few squares of TP depending on 1 or 2. Only powdered milk in the house during the week. On the weekend, they were allowed 1 cup of real milk per day for wheat cereal only. Story 108. No going outside with wet hair. Our mom convinced us we would go blind if we went out with wet hair. One day we were running behind. I took a shower and was drying my hair and got dragged out of the house by her while I was screaming and crying that I didn't want to go blind. And that's how I found out she was lying. Story 109. Not so much a rule, but my parents were like oddly against my sister and I being sick hurt. I got scarlet fever as a kid, the disease people got in the 1800s. I had that because apparently my parents ignored a case of strep long enough for it to develop into scarlet fever. I was never allowed to miss school for being sick. I was sent to school so many times when I was ill. I recall like 4 different times where I threw up at school because I complained I wasn't feeling well and they sent me anyway. Even if I was running a fever, I had to go to school. I have this distinct memory of my grandmother yelling at my mom because I had like a 102 fever for 4 days straight and my mom wouldn't do anything about it. Not even like cough syrup or acetaminophen to bring it down. I broke my foot in college and my parents refused to take me to the ER. My foot turned black and blew, and my mom looked at it and said it was fine. I ended up driving myself to urgent care after a week, and the urgent care people yelled at me because I had been driving myself around with a broken foot. My sister broke both of her wrists, and my parents didn't believe her. They thought she was making it up because her friend had broken something. Like, she couldn't use her hands, and they really thought that she was faking it. They made her go to softball practice and yelled at her for crying. I have no idea why they were so insane about it either. We had amazing health insurance, so it wasn't a money thing. Now, as an adult, I have no threshold for what is sick enough to go to the doctors. I had mono in my 20s and went to work the whole time. I worked a job where I did stock orders, carried boxes around. I could have exploded my spleen. I think people take like a month off to recover. My jerk went to work the whole time, and forget going to the ER. I've been like one time in my entire life, and it was because my friend forced me to go because I couldn't move from pain. Story 110. I have an identical twin, and we are really close in age to our older sister. We're best described as Irish triplets. Anyway, growing up, my older sister was the only one allowed to sit in the front seat of the car. My grandma always said it was because she was bigger than us and that the rest of us couldn't sit in the front seat until we hit 100 barrels. There wasn't anything to that rule. She just wanted my older sister to feel special. There were a few other things she did as well, but this was the one that drove me crazy as a kid. Also gave me a case of middle child syndrome. Being a twin made up for that, though low bone. Story 111. I have never been allowed to leave my house alone, not even to ride my bike down the street. I'm 17. I also live in a neighborhood with a pretty low crime rate. Story 112. Grandparents only let me on computer for 30 minutes. PC boot times were like 10 minutes. Now grandma is still alive and won't get off her tablet. Third one this year, mind you. Story 113. My dad wouldn't let me watch A Clockwork Orange until I read the book. That book should not be read by a 13-year-old and was far more fuked up than the film. Story 114. My grandma forbid me to look at adult content when I got my computer. Right, yeah, totally. Not like I look at adult content 10 times a week or anything. Story 115. Me and my sister, 7 and 3, couldn't play in the backyard where we had a swing set thing. This was mostly because my mother was a paranoid heroin addict that thought us being loud would make the cops come get her. But it was still really strange not playing outside often as a kid. Story 116. When I was younger, my dad would only let me use my mom's, he kept it for reasons I can't tell you, phone only 1 hour a day, no matter if it's for schoolwork or for entertainment. Once, it was my birthday, and I thought maybe I could use the phone for extra 30 minutes. Nope, got a terrible scolding, but it did help me become sneakier at doing stuff he wouldn't let. Story 117. We had assigned seats at the dinner table, and if we laughed during dinner, we were locked in the garage until everyone was done. Story 118. No birthday parties. In retrospect, it was probably because my brother and I had one each, and they were both disasters and ended in tears. At his, a kid tried to flush my brother's teddy bear down the toilet. At mine, a girl rifled through the family photos to find a naked toddler in the bath photo of me and showed everyone. Story 119. I was only allowed to drive my car if I was wearing a flat shoe. If I wanted to wear anything other than a flat shoe, I had to take the shoes with me and change into them. It wasn't just heels either. This included boots and anything with a slight heel. I think they were afraid that heels would affect my driving, but they made me do this until I was 18, so I had to do this for 2 years. Story 120. Doors open if I had a boy over. I had been out for years, but they never pushed the doors open rule if I had a girl in my room. Lost my virginity with everyone home during a sleepover. Had a buddy by the next day to brag. Still had to keep the goddarn door open. Story 121. I don't remember specifics, but I had a 9:30 bedtime ingrained in me so harshly that I was in high school before I stopped being nervous about being up later than that on a school night. Story 122. My parents had a vacation house at a very popular lake not far from us. I was 16 and have 2 older brothers. Their first rule was we had to send all females away after the sun went down. My dad even called twice when I was down there to remind me no females were welcome after dark. I never told Dad, but it turns out it didn't really matter. I saw so many boobs by the light of both the sun and moon. Boobs a guy who looks like me had no heavenly explanation for seeing. I also discovered a number of females didn't even have a rule about external lighting conditions before having intimacy. However, I did discover even a gently swaying boat inside the small cabin isn't the easiest place to have intimacy, though. That's probably not a terrible rule, at least for that boat. Only have intimacy in the boat when it's on the lift. Story 123. I just want to say some of these parents just should not have had kids. If you don't want your kid to have friends or a comfortable place to feel safe, you don't deserve the right to kids. Story 124. I wasn't allowed to open food, like if we had 2 boxes of cereal in the cabinet and I went to make a bowl and one box was just crumbs. Then I guess I wasn't eating any fudge cereal. I also wasn't allowed to get my hair cut without my mom there till I moved out. My mother was still trying to enforce a bedtime up to 2 weeks before I moved out when I was 17. I can count on one hand how many times we've seen each other in the last 15 years. Story 125. We weren't allowed to play the Sims games. My mom thought we would spend all our time creating perfect versions of ourselves, and we would forget to live our lives. She also refused to let us have friends over, or leave the house, or cut my hair how I wanted, or call my friends on the phone, or speak to my own grandparents, or talk to her about anything other than her. The super duper irony is that while my siblings and I were never allowed to play the Sims games, my mom spent literally all day every day stalking people on Facebook who she went to school with and hadn't seen in years, compiling photographs, news articles, etc. about these people. She never actually got in touch with any of these people. She just wanted to know all about them as though she were in contact with them, forgetting to live her life. Story 126. Not sure if rule or superstition, or actually rule because of superstition, we weren't allowed to clip our nails on Sunday. Story 127. No naps allowed. My mom was sure it would mentally mess me up. I ended up passing out from being so tired a few times. Story 128. Also, I have never gone for a sleepover or had a friend sleep over because my parents are very reclusive and don't like people in our home who aren't family or longtime friends, and think that if I slept at someone's place, I would disturb them or embarrass my fam with bad behavior facepalm. Story 129. My mom refused me to watch most TV programs, sometimes even educational ones, but she couldn't enforce that rule as A, by the time I was ready for school, before she even made herself breakfast, B, she would come home 8 p.m., but 45 of the time she was at work until 10 p.m. But my dad didn't give a shoot. He let me watch 12 and 15 TV shows and movies. Another weird rule was my mom would not allow us to open the sliding doors or go into the living room at nighttime because we would have to turn on the lights in the living room because she didn't like them, those exact words. This is just by far the strangest. As a kid, I didn't like most of my veggies, but I adored carrots, spinach, and kale. But my mom would refuse to buy fruits because I never ate them. But she would hide them in absurd places in the fridge, so we forgot we ever had them. And by the time we found them, they were out of date. She also did this to the margarine, so I would open a new box. Story 130. Yes, it is illegal, so it actually can lead to lots of problems. Children and women are afraid to go to the authorities with problems like harmful behavior because they are afraid of retribution for breaking the law. Can lead to some bad situations you've heard. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchus. See you soon.